Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Peter Wynn, UCLA Law School class of 1999, and I am proud to be serving as president of the Graduate and Professional Student Alumni Network. GPSA is constituted to serve all UCLA postgraduate degree holders by fostering community, networking, social well-being, mutual support, mentorship, and meaningful lifelong connection to the university and each other. If you have a postgraduate degree from UCLA, this is your network, and we are happy to see you at this inaugural event. I would like to thank the Alumni Association, our distinguished guest, speaker, and my fellow board members for all of their hard work to make today's town hall happen. Specifically, I would like to introduce those board members who will be helming the rest of today's event. We have Han Lee, our Vice President of Finance and Fundraising, as well as Michael Weismeyer, our esteemed historian, and Letty Trevino, one of GPSA's co-founders and current board member, who will now introduce our special guest.
So hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Letty Trevino. I'm a sixth year. Well, actually, I just finished my sixth year. I'm a sixth-year PhD student in the Spanish and Portuguese department at UCLA. And I have the great pleasure of introducing Susan, or Dr. Dean Susan Ettner. But as many people know, Susan likes to be called Susan. And I think that just goes to show the kind of relationship she likes to build. So I kind of wanted to do a bit of a more personal introduction and kind of talk about my relationship with Susan and why we're so excited about her being able to share her vision and her team's vision for graduate education at UCLA. So I actually met Susan for the first time because I was invited to a committee at the graduate division, and it's called MEGAP. And Susan looks a little confused, but that's where we first met. And I just had to work with her as like a colleague on the committee. And I thought, man, this is a faculty person that really, really, really cares about graduate students, right? I worked much more closely with her when she was interim dean of graduate division or of graduate education. And when I was working for the Graduate Student Association as the vice president of academic affairs. So I was working very closely with her and her team on academic policy. And I always knew right from the start that there was no selling of the graduate student experience that I needed to do. Susan was very clear what graduate students were going through, and I knew that she was going to be a big ally for us. So I was more than thrilled to find out that Susan ended up becoming our permanent dean. I might or might not have given her a pitch, encouraging her to apply for the position. And I was thrilled when she did and when she got it. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our current dean of graduate education, someone I consider a valuable mentor and really close friend, Susan Ettner.
Thank you so much, Letty, for that lovely introduction. You've been an amazing collaborator all these years, and I hope that will continue into the future. So, and thank you to the GPSA for giving me the opportunity to come and talk to you today and tell you a little bit about the changes that we're trying to make and improvements we're hoping to make in the future. And at the end, there will be a time when you can ask questions. And if we don't end up having time for everybody's questions, I just want to make sure I told you up front that I'm more than happy to talk to people later on. Email me, call me, we can Zoom, we can talk. And also, I believe that the GPSA folks will be collecting any questions and putting them together with my responses into an FAQ for you. So just want to let you know that. If I could have the slides, please. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so again, today, the goal is to tell you a little bit about some updates and some plans for the graduate division. So if I could have the next slide, I'll give you a little outline of what I want to tell you about today. So first, I thought I would tell you a little bit about my background, just so that you know who I am and sort of where I'm coming from on this. Then one of the first things that I was asked to do as interim grad dean was to develop a strategic plan for the graduate division. So we did that. We had, I think, 3 months to do it when I came in. And I wanted to tell you about the vision statement that we came up with and our strategic objectives and goals. And the entire strategic planning report is posted to our website. So I should have given you the link in here and I didn't, but I can always add that later on. So if people are interested in our strategic planning report, it is rather long, but most of it is appendices with data tables and additional information. So if you're interested in that, please go to our website and look for it. You can download it. I also wanted to tell you a little bit about some of our organizational changes, including the one that I'm most excited about, which is our new graduate and postdoc success unit. And then I'll tell you a little bit about some of the new initiatives in my various units. And then at the end, I wanted to talk about what are some of the possible opportunities for collaboration. Next slide, please. So first, just a little bit about my background. I'm first-gen college and first-gen American. I went to UCSB. I actually went to Santa Barbara Community College for a year first instead of my senior year at high school. So yes, I have a PhD, but no high school diploma, and loved City College. Transferred to UCSB and got a double bachelor's. One was in math econ and the other one was in German. I ended up, long story, how I ended up even going to graduate school. It's all due to a mentor, but I eventually ended up with a PhD in economics from MIT. And I ended up going into economics of healthcare. So I do behavioral health services research, health policy research. I ended up going to Harvard Medical School to the Department of Healthcare Policy, where I was an assistant professor, eventually promoted to associate. And then UCLA recruited me back. I was thrilled to come to UCLA. And I was first an associate professor and then a full professor in the School of Medicine as my primary appointment. And then I got a joint appointment in the School of Public Health. So I've been at UCLA since 1999. A few years ago, I decided to throw my hat in the ring and try administration. So I took on a half-time position as associate dean in the graduate division starting in 2017. So I was half associate dean, half faculty. And then when the former dean left, I became interim graduate dean starting in August 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic and budget cuts. But I then stayed for 11 months as interim grad dean, and then I was hired as the permanent graduate dean. And so I've been serving as the graduate dean since July of 2021. So that's a little bit about me. Next, please. More importantly, I wanted to tell you about our vision for the graduate division. So the vision statement that my team and I came up with is that we have the vision that we would like to be a graduate division globally renowned for our outstanding, equitable, and inclusive support of graduate and postdoctoral scholars at UCLA. Next slide, please. And to achieve that vision, we came up with 3 different strategic objectives, and each one has some goals under it. So I'll tell you about both. So our first strategic objective is to optimize the graduate division support for graduate programs. So here we would like to provide the best possible support to UCLA graduate programs to help them meet their goals for recruitment, retention, and academic success of students. Next, please. So a couple of goals that we came up with that we felt were very important, especially where we were at when I started this position, was that we wanted to improve communication and enhance relationships with campus stakeholders based on increasing trust and collaboration. And then our second goal, which the context again was pandemic, budget cuts, short staffing, and short constrained resources. So our second goal was to become the most effective stewards of staff resources possible within our budget constraints. Unfortunately, I think that goal is going to have to be a goal for a long time to come because we will have constrained budgets, but we're trying to make the most out of what we do have. Next, please. Our second strategic objective, which is much more exciting, is to assist the graduate students and postdoctoral scholars in achieving their academic potential by supporting their multifaceted needs. So in partnership with other important campus units, such as the Graduate Council, which sets policy, and Student Affairs, which provides many of the services for graduate students, we would like to provide outstanding support to graduate students and postdoctoral scholars to meet their academic, financial, and professional development needs. Next, please. So our goals are first to support efforts to improve mentoring of graduate students and postdocs. Second, to provide competitive multi-year financial packages for graduate students. And third, to promote dynamic professional development programming to support diverse career paths. There are other goals that would have been under here if some of the services were under our purview. For example, given my research, I'm very passionate about the need for strong mental health services, but some of these goals are not under our purview, so we haven't focused on those here. Next, please. So our final strategic objective is to support campus efforts to promote equity, diversity, and inclusion. So in partnership with the campus, we would like to provide support for recruitment and retention initiatives that promote equity, diversity, and inclusion among graduate students and postdoctoral scholars. Next, please. So here we have two goals. So the first goal is basically to continue what I feel we're already doing well and build upon it. So build upon the graduate division's successful past efforts to increase recruitment of graduate students and postdoctoral scholars from diverse backgrounds. And then the second goal was to develop new initiatives and systems to better monitor, retain, and support the academic success of students and postdoctoral scholars from traditionally underrepresented groups. So here we wanted to introduce some new retention programming that had been less of a focus in the past for us. Next, please. So last year, or the last 2 years, I've been working on new initiatives and some organizational changes. So I'm going to start with telling you a little bit about the organizational changes. So one change that I made is that the associate deans now have dotted line reporting to academic units. And the purpose of that is to facilitate closer collaboration, because just to explain, the associate deans, and I now have 3 half-time associate deans. I have one more than I did when I started. And they are really the faculty liaison between the graduate division and the campus. So besides myself, my 3 associate deans are the other 3 faculty members who are in the graduate division. And so they provide really invaluable feedback to our units, to the staff, because they can kind of represent the faculty perspective, and they can kind of bridge that gap. So we have 3 associate deans, and we have, and each one has a dotted line reporting to a particular academic unit. So they're kind of embedded within those units. I also have some new staff positions with the intent of improving communications, both with the campus and also externally. So we just got those staff positions, and we're working on some new initiatives that I'll talk about in a minute. And what I also then did, because I wanted to have a better focus on retention programming, in addition to continuing the great work that we've been doing on recruitment and outreach, my diversity, inclusion, and missions unit is now specified to work with students starting from the application process all the way through program entry, including bridge programs such as our competitive edge program. And then once students start their graduate programs, there's sort of a warm handoff to a brand new unit that I've created called Graduate and Postdoctoral Success, or GPS. And so that unit is sort of supposed to be one-stop shopping for, the services that we provide to support the students. We still have also our academic and postdoctoral services, or APS unit, and they're the ones who would do everything that's more policy related, forms, exceptions, working with graduate council to implement the policies that grad council sets. But GPS, which I'll talk about in a second, is designed to provide other sorts of services to support the students. So next, please. Okay, so as promised, a description of my new GPS unit. So the goal of GPS is to implement and educate the campus regarding best practices for supporting graduate students and postdocs. And we have 4 teams. We have a team that focuses on mentorship initiatives. For example, we have a new pilot. Well, actually, I'll talk about that in a second. I don't want to get ahead of my slides. So we have 4 teams. One is for mentorship initiatives. Another one is retention initiatives, and that team focuses specifically on underrepresented and first-gen students right now. Ideally, eventually we'll be able to offer programming to everybody, but we're starting with the underrepresented and first-gen students. And we have an academic case management unit, and we also do professional development. I should note that professional development is mostly under student affairs and not under us, but we focus on sort of the more academic side and things like core competencies. Next, please. Okay, so what are some of the new initiatives that GPS is doing? So a long time ago, there was a pilot of a program called Grad Strive, and the person who developed it, Taifa Alexander, left, and the program was discontinued after only a short while. When I came, but that was the retention programming that was being piloted. And when I came in, I really felt strongly that we needed more retention programming. So I revived it, and we modified and expanded it. So Grad Strive 2.0 is now targeted workshops. And then my own personal baby, because it was my idea and I am very excited about it, was that I really wanted to try a peer mentoring program. And so we implemented a peer mentoring program as part of this. And again, Grad Strive 2.0 is specifically targeted at underrepresented and first-gen students. So we've been implementing that program this year, and to my knowledge, everything seems to be going really well, and people like it, and people really like the peer mentoring. So I'm really excited about it, and we're hoping to continue building on that and expanding on that program. We also, my mentoring initiatives team, and Letty has been very involved in this and done just a spectacular job. But we have been trying to adapt the Entering Mentoring Faculty Mentor Training Program that was developed by SIMR, which is a national organization, and they developed it for STEM fields, and it's really lab-based STEM. But I would like the whole campus to have access to high quality faculty mentor training. So we have been adapting it, and we started with the humanities, and Letty, together with Diana Azurdia, did a wonderful job of adapting materials. And now Daniel Wong, who's my new GPS assistant dean, is working with Letty to to pilot test it with humanities. And we are also moving on to adapting the training materials for the arts. So we're working with TFT and with the School of Music to try to expand to those schools, and eventually we will get to all the schools. So we're pretty excited about that. We also have some ideas about how to promote annual academic progress reviews, because we collected some data and found out that only about 60% of our programs are currently even for their doctoral students, only about 60% of the programs were doing annual academic progress reviews. And we feel that those would be very important for the graduate students, so that they know how they're doing and if they're on track, and if not, what they need to do to get back on track. Because we really want to improve retention and improve time to degree. So we have some ideas about how to promote those. We also feel very passionate, all of us, about supporting diverse career pathways. Academic careers are great, and of course we want to support those, but we also feel that there's a really big need to do a lot more, and also to change the campus climate for supporting diverse career pathways. In other words, non-academic careers. So we are working on that. And then we also are starting to develop a program to have an award for faculty mentoring of graduate students, because we realize that that also doesn't exist on campus. There's faculty awards for mentoring undergraduates, and there are faculty awards for mentoring junior faculty, and there is no award for mentoring graduate students and postdocs. So we plan to correct that problem. So Next slide, please. Okay, so my DIA unit is also undergoing some new initiatives. So we are planning to expand the Competitive Edge Bridge program to the entire campus, because in the past it's been limited to certain schools and divisions, and we think that it's a great program and we think that everybody should have access to it. So we're working on expanding that. I also, when I came in, I asked DIA to develop a holistic admissions workshop to take it around to the campus, and that took a little longer than expected, but we have a workshop, and to my knowledge, it's starting to be presented to different admissions committees and then departments. We also expanded application fee waivers for low-income applicants. We're also working with some other units to develop new pathway programs. There's an initiative, a Growing Our Own initiative in the UC, and we've been participating in those discussions. My terrific new DIA assistant dean, Tiara Ware, would like to do special yielding events for particular underrepresented groups. So we're excited about that idea, and she's working on that. And I already mentioned the new pathway programs that we're working on. So next, please. Thank you. So my fellowships and financial services unit. So we would really like to expand funding for the diversity fellowships. The Coda Robles is the 4-year fellowship for doctoral students. The GOFP is a 1-year fellowship for terminal master's students. And so we've been trying to advocate on campus. We just got turned down for our budget ask, but we're going to keep trying. And also I am in the process of getting training to learn how to do fundraising, because I feel very passionate about this. And one reason I feel passionate about this is because we have data showing that it really works. So among the applicants, or among the admitted students who are nominated for these fellowships, the ones who get the fellowships, who we make an offer to, have a much higher yield rate than the ones that are not offered this kind of funding. So I think that really shows, if anything, I think that there's a conservative bias in comparing those numbers. So it really shows that, offering that stability of funding is a critical tool if we hope to diversify our graduate student population. So, so that is a high priority for me, to try to raise funds for those fellowships. We also allocate block funding every year to the schools and divisions. And other UC campuses, for example, UC Davis has very successfully tied a portion of the block funding to performance metrics, how they're doing with the graduate students. So we would like to try pilot and try to see whether that might, lead to better, better, more evidence-based practices among the schools and divisions, if we can give them some, positive incentives. And for that, we have additional, I got permission to have a little bit of additional money to try the pilot, because I don't want to take any money away from the schools that they're currently getting, but we got a little bit of extra money so that we could try a pilot to see if that might work. And then we also have been developing a multi-year funding initiative, and that involves data dashboards so that departments can see what funding their students are currently getting. We are developing a budget/funding model so that departments, when they're making funding offers at admission, they can better predict what their funding situation is going to look like, in the hope that that will allow them to take a little bit more risk. And then I also got funding to pilot an insurance risk pool, because sometimes funding offers aren't as generous as they might be, because the departments are a little bit risk averse and they don't want to commit up front to funding students. And so if we have an insurance risk pool, so that, for example, if they over yield in a particular year, then they can tap into that funding pool. We thought that might sort of encourage them to make more generous offers to students at admission. Because the reality is, if you look at the data, Most students, the vast majority of students, do end up getting some sort of funding for their entire time at UCLA, but it's not guaranteed up front, and it's very stressful for the students. If they're going to get the funding anyway, you really want to provide it up front, both because that helps increase the yield, but also because that's much less stressful for the students to know that they have that to count on. So that's really our goal, is to provide more financial security for the students. Next, please. Okay, so for communications, I mentioned that earlier. So we are in the process of implementing a new ticketing system in the hope that that will improve our responsiveness to campus queries. We also created a position that that is for a marketing / communications specialist position. We already had half of a person for marketing, and we've added half of a person that's going to work on a communication strategy. And then we also, another pet project, which will take a while and resources, but we really want to overhaul our website because we feel that the usability and appeal of our graduate division website really could use some improvement. So that's something that's also on our plate for trying to work on this year and going forward. Next, please. Okay, so opportunities for collaboration with the alumni. So we would love it if you were interested in any of these areas. So recruitment and outreach can always use alumni to talk to prospective students. We can't take you on any trips, unfortunately, but we are doing a lot more virtual events than we used to, and we would love it if you could participate in virtual events. And if you're interested in that, please email at the address on the screen. Development and fundraising, I can always use help with that. And if you have any suggestions for me, we do have a new giving page. I believe we just revamped that, I believe. And again, you know, we would be happy to have people contribute to any cause within the graduate division that they are interested in. But if they're open to different ideas, the three that I have been trying to get more funding for are, first of all, the more diversity fellowships, second, to support the retention initiatives that I was mentioning earlier, like the Grad Strive. And one of the reasons that we need funding for Grad Strive is because I think it's important to pay the peer mentors for their time to spent mentoring the other graduate students. So we've been giving them gift cards for for meeting with their mentees to compensate them. So that's something that we could use funding for. And then professional development initiatives, for example, we still have Grad Slam, and we're still excited about Grad Slam, and we could use money for the awards for that. So those are some of the things that we've been trying to raise money for. Next, please. We would love it if we could get volunteers for our events. Unfortunately, I think for legal reasons, we're only allowed to use current UCLA employees. So any of you who might be at UCLA in a different capacity, if you're interested in volunteering, that would be wonderful. We'd love to see you. I'm trying to look into whether we can have people, I don't know, sign a form so that they can volunteer. I was trying to volunteer my children to help us out. And I was told that we couldn't do that, but I'm thinking there might be a way legally to do it. So, but if you're a current UCLA employee and you're interested in volunteering at events, please email at the address that's on the screen. And then also we have a really great alumni interest form, and I'll show you in the next slide what's on there. But you can, if you're interested, you can sign up at that website, and you can meet and connect with graduate and post-professional students and postdocs. And there are lots of different ways to do that: informally, short-term, formal, or long-term. Next slide, please. So if you do go to that form and fill it out, it will ask you which of these different options you're interested in. So there's short and long-term mentorship, informational interviews, alumni panels, meet and greets, alumni spotlight. You could introduce your company to students and trainees, or if you have any other suggestions for us, how you'd like to connect or how you'd like to help us, you can fill that out on the form, or you can also just email me afterwards. Next, please. So here's my email address. email is actually the best way to get a hold of me. It's actually even more reliable than cell phone or texting or anything else. So if you have any suggestions or comments or questions or anything at all, happy to hear from you. And, you know, I really would like to connect. And, or if you even just want to reach out, I've had alumni reach out to me and just want to tell me about their experience at UCLA. And I'm happy to hear about that as well, because it really helps us to understand what we need to do better and what we need to work on. And even if it's not always something that's directly under our purview, we can also, you know, reach out to other units and pass along the message gently and tactfully. So feel free to contact me for whatever reason. Next, please. And thank you again for inviting me. It was, it's really nice to have the ability to connect. So thank you.
Okay, great. I think the next portion is we're going to do a quick Q&A. But really appreciate kind of all the information that you provided up to now. But so the first question is, I mean, you mentioned up front your impressive background, but why specifically did you want the position of Dean of Graduate Education?
That's a great question. So my primary faculty appointment is in the David Geffen School of Medicine, as I think I mentioned, but I have a PhD in economics and I'm not a physician. So I didn't have any students to teach there. But soon after I came to UCLA, I was asked to get a joint appointment in the Department of Health Policy and Management in the Fielding School of Public Health. And in addition to teaching methods, I started mentoring graduate students. And I loved it. I found it really rewarding. It was probably the most rewarding part of my job. And I really liked helping graduate students to try to achieve their potential. So the idea of sort of being able to help a broader population of graduate students was very enticing to me. I also always thought that maybe I'd be good at administration, not to toot my own horn, but I'm pretty well organized. And also with my economics training, you know, that's very helpful for positions where you have to do decision making in situations with constrained resources. And, you know, economics kind of teaches you how to think about that sort of decision making. So when the opportunity came up for to apply for the half-time position as associate dean in the graduate division, I figured I had nothing to lose. Maybe I could do some good and try to help graduate students from different disciplines and see if I liked administration. So I applied for it, and I guess the rest is history. I really enjoy being in the graduate division, and especially as grad dean, what I like. There are many things that are challenging about being grad dean, but what I really like is that when I have an idea that I think can help, like, for example, creating a brand new unit called Graduate and Postdoc Success and trying to think hard about what are the things that graduate students and postdocs really need to stay in their program and you know, and be all that they can be. You know, when I have an idea like that, I actually can try to make it happen. I mean, it's always subject to the resources we have, but you know, but at least I can try to make it happen, and I can try to advocate with the senior leadership on campus that holds the purse strings. So.
Great, thank you. And just Michael, before you ask the next question, I just want to point the attendees to the slide that's up there. So if you have questions that you'd like answered in real time, or if you want them to be answered after this session, then there's the email address for Jeanette. So go ahead, Michael.
Thank you. Yeah. So for those of us that, you know, may not have been a student over the last couple of years, we can only maybe imagine what life has been like, you know, for students during the pandemic. We've obviously, you know, heard about it on the news and, you know, seen emails from UCLA, but maybe if you could first describe a little bit about what life was like, what's been different for graduate students during the course of the pandemic with their educational experiences that may be different from what those of us that obviously attended and graduated before that. And then as we continue to move forward, what do you foresee as some of the ways in which graduate education may be changed permanently, either bad because of the pandemic.
Sorry, I got all of it except the last little bit. What do I, going forward, what do I see
Well,
as?
I guess it's, we see that a lot of life has changed because of the pandemic. So are there things that you see that graduate education may change permanently, either good or bad, because of the pandemic? Are there ways that you think that, things are not going to be going back to the way they were before the pandemic?
Yeah, thank you. No, you got a little bit garbled. That's why I didn't hear it. So thank you for that. So great question. Things obviously were incredibly challenging for the graduate students during the pandemic, especially I think for international students because of the visa situations, and the need to have in-person classes. Our incoming graduate students from other countries, weren't, in many cases, were not able to get here because even though the ones who were already here ended up getting grandfathered in, even if they moved to virtual classes only, but the ones who are abroad ended up, for the large part, having to stay abroad. And then especially in some of the countries with comprehensive OFAC sanctions, they couldn't even take classes remotely from their home country. So that was really a problem. And just sort of the lack of interaction. Obviously everybody moved to Zoom quickly, and while in some ways Zoom is fine and can handle certain things, but it's, it really doesn't replace the in-person interactions, and certainly for some kinds of research, it really doesn't. And so it was very challenging because we were under really tight restrictions from LA County. I know I was involved in a lot of those discussions, and we were just, our hands were really tied in terms of what we were allowed to do. So, we were really shut down for a long time, and it did delay degree progress for some students, and, and led to some financial hardships as well, with some jobs evaporating, as I understood from the GSA, and, so. And the campus dealt with it as well as we were able to, but it was really a rough time for everybody. The workload also doubled for, it was incredible at a time when there were budget cuts, and short staffing also. There was just a lot more to do, and then that meant that we couldn't provide as fast or as good service as we normally might have been able to do because there were many more things that had to be done. And I could go into examples, but I won't. So it was a very challenging time, but I have to say that for the future, I'm going to focus on the positive aspects of what I think we did learn, or what is now possible as a result. So I guess I see a possible impact first on teaching, second on our ability to offer programming, and third on our ability to recruit at smaller institutions. And those are all positive impacts. So first, in terms of teaching, I think that now we all have a much better understanding of what's involved in trying to create a really high quality online or hybrid course. And we also see that it is possible. It takes time and resources to do it well, but it is possible. And I've seen a really heightened interest on campus for developing permanent online and hybrid courses, and also entire degree programs. So those have to get approved through all the appropriate channels, which is not the graduate division, it's the graduate council and beyond, depending on what's being proposed. But given that there's a lot of demand now from students, I think that I've seen some movement in that direction. And I think that's a positive thing. I think that being able to offer more choice about, having things be in person versus hybrid versus completely virtual, I think would be a good thing. And also, having access and facility with the Zoom option is actually really helpful for us in the sense that it makes certain activities financially viable that otherwise might not have been. So something that I didn't realize until I got to grad division is that when we want to have events or programming, we have to rent space, and it's expensive at UCLA. And so we have to budget for that. But some events or some programming you can do over Zoom, not everything, because again, there's nothing that replaces in person, but if we can offer some of these meetings or events by Zoom, then that saves us money, and then that frees up the resources for other things that we want to do with them. So that's a good thing. And then also something that I am excited about, and that hopefully we're going to be able to do going forward, is that we do a fair amount of recruitment travel. We go to recruitment fairs, ABRCamps and SOCNAS. We go out to HBCUs and other minority serving institutions, and and do presentations and do recruitment for graduate school. But obviously recruitment travel does get expensive, and it is very time consuming for the staff. So usually we've had to limit to going out to institutions that are maybe in geographic clusters. Like when I was an associate dean, I went to the DC area and we visited some local HBCUs. I also went to Atlanta and we visited some local HBCUs, but we focus on the larger ones. We focus on the clusters. But a Zoom presentation is better than no presentation. And so for institutions that are interested in having us there, even if it's virtual, it's just much more feasible now to sort of have a Zoom session and do a presentation and answer questions and try to reach out to people even at much smaller institutions. So I think that will enable us to have our recruitment and outreach be a little bit more maybe egalitarian than it was before.
Great. So the next question, you mentioned a lot about equity, diversity, and inclusion, and that's, a big priority for you. So, but who would you say are some of the more vulnerable populations in the graduate student body, and what are you doing to support them, or how are you supporting them?
Yeah, now that's a hard question, and the reason it's hard because we have so many vulnerable populations, and different populations are vulnerable in different ways for different reasons. And they need different kinds of support. And, and I would also argue, obviously, that there's no graduate student population that doesn't need a lot of support, because graduate school is really hard. And by the way, kudos to all of you on the call for having gotten through it, because, I know I nearly didn't myself. It's challenging, but so there are a lot of groups that I worry especially about supporting. So obviously, students who are from underrepresented racial and ethnic backgrounds, undocumented students, LGBTQ+ students, especially our trans students, students with disabilities, first-gen students. We have many students with financial precarity, especially we have a lot of graduate students supporting families. One of the differences between undergrads and graduate students, as you probably all know, is that graduate students are a little bit older and they often have families and other kinds of responsibilities and other things going on that, need to be supported. So parents, graduate students or parents, we do have, not a lot, but we do have some former foster youths who are in graduate school. As a woman in a male-dominated discipline myself, there was one female faculty member out of 30 when I was going through graduate school, and so I have a lot of empathy for what that group goes through. International students have a whole different set of issues and challenges that they're dealing with. So there are a lot of different populations, and I'm hoping it's not a zero-sum game, in the sense that, I'm hoping that we will be able to help all of them, and, not just, and that it, helping one of those groups doesn't crowd out help for the other. And I do want to say that, from my older child, who is very intersectional, I learned about intersectionality. And I think some of our most vulnerable groups are the ones who are intersectional, where they're facing multiple challenges simultaneously. And those are the ones that probably I worry about the most, because it's sometimes it's a little bit, overwhelming. It's like the straw that broke the camel's back if you're just dealing with too many different things. So in terms of how we're trying to support them, I did speak a little bit about our efforts to increase funding for graduate students. At the risk of sounding too much like an economist, funding is sort of the number one thing, because, if you're worried about how you're going to pay your bills, then everything else kind of, comes second to that. Unfortunately, we fully spend out our funding every year, and we only have about $50,000 in gift funds. Well, maybe by now it's 60,000, but when I came in, I found out that there were no reserves in the graduate division. We fully commit the funding every year, and we have about 50K in gift funds, and that's for kind of to help the entire campus of, more than 12,000 graduate students under our purview. So, money's a challenge, but as I had mentioned earlier, I'm really motivated to try to fundraise and advocate on behalf of the graduate students. I'm taking a training next month. I'm right there trying to, and we submitted a number of budget asks to academic planning and budget, none of which were approved this year, but I'm hoping next year, because we have a new executive vice chancellor and provost coming in, and we've had an interim this past year, and usually interims quite rightfully don't want to commit things because they don't want to commit the next person who's going to come in permanently. So it can be very hard to get big funding asks approved during the year when somebody that is supposed to approve it is interim. But I'm hopeful that the new EVCP coming in, which is Darnell Hunt, who's currently the dean of the Division of Social Sciences, I'm hopeful that he will be very supportive of graduate education, and that maybe we can make some headway on our funding requests. And of course, apart from providing the greater financial security, we're also trying to provide better support through that new graduate and postdoc success unit that I discussed earlier. We also are trying hard to collaborate with student affairs. I mentioned that a number of the services that graduate students use are under the purview of student affairs. For example, Graduate Student Resource Center, Graduate Writing Center, Graduate Career Services. Those services are all under student affairs, but we have been collaborating very closely. And I think we're in part due to the work that Letty and JP Santos did while they were leading the GSA. We, have closer ties and also a work group that is trying to make sure that there are no holes in the services, that we get a holistic picture of everything that the grad students need, and that some unit on campus is trying to address those needs. So we're doing our best to try to make sure that we offer comprehensive services to the students, and especially those students who are in particular need.
I think we have time for maybe two more questions. I think one from me, one from Han. I guess one question might be, is like, if you were to look back, to tell yourself, when you talked about your biography of how you got to where you were, as you said, like not even having a high school diploma or something, and coming from your background, what would you tell yourself maybe differently, or about how you got to where you are now, and thinking about the challenges that but just sort of in general that graduate professional students face?
Let's see, what would I tell myself differently about where I don't know, I guess I've been a little bit of an opportunist in my career. It's both. I guess it has its pros and cons that I never set out. I never actually had any goals career-wise. I have personal goals, and my personal goals, I like to help people. I mean, that's how I got into my research area, because I felt passionate about so again, I do behavioral health services research, which is trying to improve mental health care and substance abuse treatment for people. And, and I got into that research area because it seemed like it could make a difference. It could improve, population health. And the same way I got into administration, I am doing it because, I like to help people on an individual basis. And it's even better if you can try to do it on a population basis. And so, but I never start off my career saying, oh, I want to be this or that. I mean, I've always been grateful to, when I got an academic job, I was grateful. When I got tenured, I was grateful. I've been sort of grateful all along for reaching the next step, but I've never look beyond that. I just want to do a good job of wherever I am at the moment. And so I don't know if I would have told myself anything different. I mean, my only real regret in my career is that I wanted to do the Peace Corps, but I didn't think that taking a gap was, at the time, this was decades ago, of course, and I didn't think that that would be, I thought that would be frowned upon to take gap years to do the Peace Corps. So I never did the Peace Corps. And so if I could do it all over again, I guess the one thing I would do differently is I would have just said, I'm going to do the Peace Corps and then come back. But other than that, I don't think I have anything, that I would have done differently, really. And advice for, if they're advice for graduate students, I mean, again, as a first gen student, I always suffered terribly from imposter syndrome. I mean, to this day, I have it. And the advice that I always give the students, I was just at the McNair conference giving advice to a lovely young undergraduate, and who shared that she also had imposter syndrome. And I said, the feelings of imposter syndrome might never go away, but you can choose to ignore them when you choose your actions, right? You don't have to behave based on how you feel. You can just sort of, make the right decisions. And so when, in my career, when it came time to apply for a job, even if I thought, well, they're never going to hire me, apply for it anyway. And if they turn you down, rejection hurts, but you really don't have anything to lose except for your own ego. And so I guess that I've just kind of stuck with that over the years, so.
Great. So final question that we have for you as we wrap up, or we're close to wrapping up. But so UCLA is a large institution, and by that nature, it has lots of different schools and departments that each have their different priorities and models of research and learning. How do you work across the diverse groups to create a unified vision for the overall graduate program?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and that is a huge challenge. We're the largest UC campus. As grad dean, I have, just by comparison, UCSB, where I was an undergraduate, has 1/3 the number of programs and 1/3 the number of graduate students that we do. So being grad dean at a place like UCSB is a little different experience than being grad dean at UCLA. So I confess it's a little overwhelming at times. And I feel like I'm trying to get to know every single one of my departments and, and the people, and it's a challenge. We do have a model where we've got the associate deans. And one reason that I negotiated to get my third associate dean back is because the model is that the associate deans are assigned to specific schools and divisions, and they become the partner and the liaison, and they're the ones who really get to know those schools and divisions really well, and develop those relationships. I mean, I try, but it's too many for one person. And so, in part, I rely on my associate deans to sort of, be that liaison, and also let me know what I need to know about the different departments. We try to be flexible and tailor things to the needs of the different departments. But there are also actually a lot of similarities. I think we found out, for example, when we started adapting the entering mentoring training for North Campus, even though the mentorship model is really different in a lab than it is on, for example, in humanities, but a lot of the fundamental principles, I would say, are very similar. They just sort of manifest differently and with different examples, but the principles are the same. So, so I think that we try to figure out where the commonalities across campus and the things that, are generally viewed as best practices. For example, every department really should have annual academic progress reviews for their graduate students. And I don't think that really varies by discipline. But there are other, certainly ways that things are very different. For example, on South Campus, a lot of the funding is grant funding, and there are more training grants for students. And, and that's one reason why we have some fellowship programs that are only open to North Campus to try to compensate for the less availability of grant funding for those students. And so we try to, it's a balance, because I'm trying to be fair across all of campus. And I would say that's probably been one of my biggest challenges as grad dean, is every time I'm trying to figure out what's kind of the fair thing to do across all of the many different schools, divisions, and departments under our purview. So.
Thank you very much. And just a reminder to all of the attendees, if there was a question that you wanted to make sure to get answered, to send an email, and then those will get all put together. And once Dean Ettner is able to answer those, we'll be able to publish them on our Facebook page and some of our other social media. And as she mentioned, she's very happy to answer those. So thank you again for answering those questions, and we'll turn it back over to Peter.
Wonderful. Thank you, Han and Michael, for moderating the question and answer session. And much gratitude to you, Dean Ettner, for generously sharing your time and vision with us. We certainly wish you well with the achievement of the Graduate Division's strategic goals and look forward to continuing our collaboration with you going forward. I hope that everyone has enjoyed this town hall, and thank you all for being here with us. Again, GPSA is your alumni network as a UCLA postgraduate degree holder, and we invite you to stay connected and involved with us in the future. You can find us on all the major social networking platforms, including LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So please feel free to reach out, make suggestions, join the board or a committee, and attend future events. Have a wonderful evening, and go Bruins.